Doing a test recording of sorts, I believe. Probably. So we'll see if the frame rate is any better. And doing a test recording of sorts, I believe. Okay, that part's working so far. So far. Yeah, come on. Scroll down. Oh, that's right, paused it. Can't do that. No, I can't really see it, which is sort of irritating. Well, I guess we'll find out. Where's me? Gotta put me back on here. Scroll down. Roll there. All right, so I think that's working so far. Then I have to put the stupid chatters back in. I'll worry about that later. Yeah, that looks about right. Close enough. All right, so we're back to the same dopey guy about the same dopey crap. Yeah, and I should be able to put the drawing up. Okay, so I guess I'll just read his comment and then just do a quick drawing, just to point out what needs to be illustrated and what points he keeps ignoring and ignoring and ignoring. So there's no point. Too lazy to even calculate the inductance of a piece of wire to support your ridiculous theory. It wouldn't do you any good to calculate it if you can't demonstrate that you can test it in some rational way. Which I think I can sort of do that, but regardless, I didn't do the experiment. So the electric boom guy covered most all of the bases. Now, yes, I could have covered a few more bases, but it really doesn't need to be done. And you're saying I should waste my time on it when it's not my obligation to prove the extraordinary claim that there's two voltages in the same location. It's the person who's making the claim who needs to do the defense. Professor Lewin even spoon-fed you dV over dt waveforms. There was no waveforms, so that's what are you talking about? Waveforms over the resistors. There's no waveforms anywhere. There either is a voltage or there isn't a voltage. There's no waves involved here at all. So I don't know where you got that from. And in the meantime, you just badmouth Professor Lewin and anyone who has actually put in a few minutes. Well, it's not true. I mean, obviously the guy who put in the most minutes playing with the experiment was the electro boom guy. And you're the one bad-mouthing him. Yeah. So, hypocrite much? Of effort to calculate the size of the inductor. Again, the size is irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. And electric boom guy did it. He took a plain piece of wire and showed you this is what the total inductance of the wire is capable of producing. Now, the obvious question is that how it produces it when two resistors are in the circuit? I would argue no, it's not. You and electric dumb can go on hallucinating. So again, you're calling us the hallucinators when we're saying that obviously you're delusional if you think there's two voltages in the same location and you don't have any theory of inductance that explains to me why one assumes that there's 10 volts created at every location in the wire when any kid could figure that out, that if you make the wire shorter, there's going to be less voltage in it. Durr. About the way nature works. Well, obviously you don't know anything about it. Some people were just never meant to understand Faraday or Maxwell. Again, it's what's to understand. They're formalizations. They're just telling you there's a proportional relationship between a couple of things. It's just not, there's nothing to understand. There's no understanding built into the equations. You think epsilon 0 is something that somebody should understand when even the Wikipedia page says we just made up the number? There is no such thing. We're just going to call it now. We're just going to change its name to the magnetic constant, even though we don't even know what the hell it is. Right. Even when spoon-fed. So again, it's just more nonsense. I want the spoon-feeding of showing me evidence of where there's an occasion where there's two voltages in the same location, except in a circumstance like this, where you're pretending there's voltage across the entire wire. Let me switch to the drawing, see if this works. Trying these things, I don't know if they're going to work, but we'll try them anyway. Okay, and then I get rid of that because it'll be on the screen. It seems like it's working. So this is all really pathetically simple, but okay, so the electric boom showed just take the plain wire, all right, and it's in the inductor, and you just measure the voltage, and he came out to whatever it was. His readings were different, so his was like 2.7 millivolts. But in Lewin's case, it would have been 10 volts. And all right, so that's what the wire as a total wire will create. Now, is it your opinion? I mean, these are direct questions I wish you would answer. Is it your opinion that if I tested the voltage from this location and say this location, I'd also get 10 volts? And if I tested from this location to this location, I'd get 10 volts. If I tested from here to here, I'd get 10 volts. If I tested here to here, the same location, I'd get 10 volts. Is that your opinion? Is that what you think how the nature works? Because I'd argue it doesn't work that way, that the size of this wire changes how much voltage you're going to read in it, because this is where the voltage is being created, little bits at a time, little bits of pressure being collected across this entire wire, and that's how the voltage is being created in the wire. It collects the whole pressure and it moves it to a plus side and a minus side. That's simple. All right, so in the experiment, you essentially got two wires. You got a wire up here, a wire down here, two disconnected pieces of wire. And you would assume that if they're 10 volts when it's a whole wire, that these are probably just going to be 5 volts and minus 5 volts. You know, if you measured across there, this one's going from right to left, the voltage. This one's going left to right, the voltage. So this one will read 5 and 0, and this one will read 0 and 5. It was a Lewin example. And those are your collectors. Those are your two pieces of wire that are collecting voltage. Now, what's wrong with that theory? You want to explain how that's ludicrous or somehow nonsense, and that's not how reality would work? I mean, yes, I think that's exactly how reality would work. The only thing we're changing now is we're going to put 2 resistors in here. All right, and you know, now these two currents, these two batteries will be connected to each other by a resistor. We know what batteries do across resistors, and it creates some heat and some current moves across them, but it's always going to be the high pressure will move to low pressure. That's the way it's going to work. It's going to go this way through this resistor, and it's going to go this way through this resistor. So that's the other question I'd ask, a direct question. If I have just a plain loop of wire and I have no gap in it, which is sort of like this example, can I measure any voltage here at all? If I put a probe here and a probe here, will I measure a voltage? If I put a probe here and I put a probe here, will I measure any voltage? You know, is there any way to measure a voltage on a closed loop? Is there? Is it possible for the voltage to be measurable unless I make this out of really a horrible conductor? Is that possible? I already know it's not. The closed loop doesn't have voltage in it because it's closed and it's a dead short. So all the voltage is just eaten up in the dead short. So it will read 0 volts for the whole thing. These all have the inductor in them, of course. So you haven't dealt with any of these issues. And the real point, too, is that, you know, to compound this further, we have the loop. And then we're going to probe it. And our probe wires are going to be going right in the field of this inductor. And there's absolutely no reason to think that they're not going to go positive and negative, just like any other wire put in an inductor. The inductor is going to induct right across those wires also. And it's going to push this wire plus minus, you know, and it's going to push this wire minus plus. Is there some rational argument you can make how that's not how reality works? So you haven't touched any of these subjects, and neither did Professor Lewin. And they're directly the subjects asserted by the electro boom guy, is especially this one about probing. And he has some sense that these wires are secondaries of a transformer. He drew it right for you. He walked you right through it. He drew the little coil and explained it's just like a secondary in a transformer, no difference. Just a crappy secondary because it's only one wire, But that's what it is. It's a secondary. It's going to collect voltage, just like a transformer would. How have you counter-argued any of that? All you've said is, I know for certain. So you know for certain that there can be two voltages in the same location on a wire, and you believe that. Why? Because Professor Lewin implies it. He doesn't even say it. He just implies it. He doesn't have the guts, I don't think, to say it. That he actually believes there's two voltages in one location. But why do you believe that? What evidence is there for it? Beyond this gimmick experiment, what evidence is there that there can be two voltages in the same place at the same time in the same wire? Where's the evidence? There isn't any. Quite obviously. I would assert. See if there's any comments. This roll down. No, good. So yeah, we can just leave that invisible. We don't really need that. So what I need to do is go back to this and lay out this, and that should work. All right, and then I'll pop open. And then I'll bring this forward, and then I will. Ooh, how do I open that? Clever. Well, anyway, I'll just scroll this up because I don't know how else to do it. Yeah. There we go. And I can scroll this back down. I can't double click first. My stroke hand, it just doesn't double click right for this particular job. I have to change the whatever speed. All right, so this was somebody I just blocked. I just said, the hell with this crap. She posted 3 stupid, ignorant comments, and I just said, oh, that's enough of that shit. Elena Marina. Okay, so she has if she had some content on her webpage, on her channel page, I would have said, okay, give it a shot, see if she has something to say, but I'm sick of trolls. Whenever I see someone on the internet claiming to have squared the circle, so there's the idea is that they've circled the circle, that they're not doing square peg into round hole anymore. So that's how I see you people. You people are a bunch of morons trying to hammer bent space into reality, hammer dark energy into reality, hammer wave particle duality into the box. You're the one trying to shove the rectangles into the circles and failing. Or disprove Einstein. Well, I mean, Einstein could be easily disproved on a lot of subjects, frankly. So he wasn't perfect, even in even those who would glorify him would have to admit he made a couple of mistakes. Or anyway, are some other highly improbable absurdity. So highly improbable and absurd probably aren't the same. Probably can't qualify one with the other. It's kind of a redundancy. But anyway, so this whole idea that nobody can do something, you're just sounding like the people who says nobody can build a flying machine and nobody can do this and nobody can do that. It's impossible. So here we have Einstein's theory that even the physicist that made it about quantum mechanics is we don't understand it. It came out of Feynman's own words. I don't know how it works either. Who cares? That's their attitude. I don't know how it works. Who cares? Now, I call that absurd, okay? And again, I could just point to Einstein pointing at the entanglement and saying, spooky action at a distance, when that's exactly what bent space is. Spooky action at a distance. No explanation for a mechanism. Where the energy comes from, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Might as well just be an invisible man. So here, defending your theory that is built on such weak evidence, the Eddington experiment, horrible evidence, just absolute garbage to anybody who has any intellectual honesty. You don't have any intellectual honesty. I mean, the guy who does the experiment writes in his own journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. And yet the New York Times headline, Einstein right. You don't see anything absurd in that. You don't see anything absurd in somebody like Young coming around about 150 years after Newton and doing a two-slit experiment when Newton had already done the single-slit experiment and the single hair experiment. He had already demonstrated wave interference. Okay, him and Huygens had already had a big discussion about wave-particle duality. Young didn't bring anything new to the table, really. We already knew that this was something that happened when you shot light next to surfaces. And you people are so absurdly stupid, you can't even figure that out. You think Young did something remarkable. Totally unremarkable. So, wow. I mean, you're so out of intellectual integrity. You have none. I am reminded of the quote by John von Neumann, and who cares? Who is he? What, did he have oral sex with my mother or something? Who the fuck is he? Who said, the sciences do not try to explain, well, then they're assholes. They hardly even try to interpret. Well, I don't even know what interpretation has to do with this. You're doing deduction. That's what a detective does. Detectives don't interpret. Detectives deduce. They mainly make models. Yes, detectives will do that. They'll draw a picture of the dead body in one room and the guy over here as a possible suspect and the backyard with the golf balls. They'll draw that stuff. So, to see if they can model how the guy went from one place to another and got there in 10 minutes. They'll do all that. By a model is meant a mathematical construct. Well, that's not what detectives do. They don't waste their time with too much math. They take a few measurements, they measure how long the person's foot is and say, 14, size 14 Bruno Mali. No, there's some necessary measurements, but measurements aren't going to tell you who did it. That's just horseshit. With the addition of certain verbal interpretations, which I don't even know what the fuck that possibly could mean, so I don't know what von Neumann was thinking there. Isn't everything we do in our brain, the whole process, verbal in a sense? Even when my brain's talking to me, okay, it doesn't have audio. The speakers aren't plugged in, but I can hear it. Describes observed phenomenon. So again, describing effects rather than deducing causes. So we have two entirely different understanding of the mission statement here. Describing effects is really easy. Cute kitty. That's really easy to do. How does Kitty work? Okay, how dense is his bones? That's a little more complicated, douche. The justification of such a mathematical construct, I don't think you need to justify it. I'm just saying, we obviously know there's a certain amount of water going over Niagara Falls. Does that explain waterfalls? By just saying we know how much water is going over the falls there, I've explained why the water falls. No, you haven't. I mean, this is just such a lame mush. Is solely and precisely that it is expected to work. Yes, and working is fine, but again, there's a concept out there called getting the right answer for the wrong reason, and it's a liability. And smart people know it's a liability, and so they realize that there could be hey, you know what? The spent space thing is just recognizing the inverse square law. And there's a whole bunch of ways to recognize the inverse square law. There's a whole bunch of ways you can create the exact same bent curve. You don't have to make invisible man space. All right, that is correctly to describe the phenomenon from a reasonably wide area. Yes, that's the mission statement, to correctly describe it, not just to make a mathematical model, but to explain it, to add the necessary functional parts. The bowling ball hits the plastic ducky. The plastic ducky falls on blah blah blah. You got to explain the Rube Goldberg. Furthermore, it must satisfy certain aesthetic criteria. Well, I think that's just silly. That's baby talk. That is, in relation to how much it describes, it must be rather simple. Well, the simplicity isn't anything to do with aesthetics. The simplicity has to do with the fact that if your model gets more complicated, then you're creating a god. You're not doing I understand its evolution and it goes down. It doesn't start with more complex organisms. It starts with simpler things first and moves up to the complexity. Simple first, complexity later. That has nothing to do with aesthetics. That has to do with logic. I think it would do you well. I think it would do you well to go fucking kill yourself. How's that for a suggestion? For these sorts of people, so you can call people these sorts of people. Yes, well, I think your sort, those who are belligerently ignorant, stupid, are arguing from incredibly weak and moronic positions, just like religious nuts. No evidence, but you assert it. You know it in your heart. You know in your heart there's two voltages in the same location. You know in your heart that space is bent. You don't know it by any evidence. To consider this statement the next time they decide to go online and start talking out of their hats. Well, I don't wear a hat. And, frankly, I'm the one putting up evidence. I'm in the room inviting any one of you weak asses to come in here and make your silly arguments and challenge me with something like some sort of actual challenge to something I've said, where you take one of my quotes where I say there's never two voltages in the same place at the same time, and you demonstrate how they're wrong. You're the pussies, literally, the skanky pussies. Anyway, so here's another comment. I find that these things are a common problem for those who like to rely entirely upon source code. So this is kind of idiotic, right? This is about the Linux thing, or maybe it's about the fact that I'm having a little trouble with getting the frame rate up on this less than powerful computer. Anyway, you think you're being frugal and efficient by not purchasing a program from a company. Yeah, no, I think I'm not being a sucker and being abused by some rich fuck like you, right? Some fuck ass who probably just inherited it, and have them steal money from me. Yeah, I'm not stupid enough to say, yeah, I'm going to give the rich money. That only makes programs compatible with their own stuff. But in the end of the day, yeah, so that's what you think in the end of the day. In the end of the day, your civilization cost trillions of dollars more than mine. Everybody, and yours just wastes a bunch of industry, just wastes people's time creating gimmicks. We've got to stop them from cheating. So we must, they spend more time, defending their house than building their house. And you have no idea what some of these source codes do. Well, again, if you're saying it, somebody's, paying some attention, the whole point of the source code is that it has already been examined by a lot of other people also. So that's just nonsense also. I suggest getting some good tech support. Yeah, and pay for it? Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that either, retard. So you just don't understand how the game should work at all. Since I can see you're new to Linux, so what? Any platform is going to have bugs in it. And you're basically suggesting if I had a problem with Windows, I shouldn't go online and try to find a problem. I should go ask Microsoft and pay them. They gave me a crappy operating system. I should ask them to fix it for money. Yeah, I don't think I'll do that. Or maybe consider switching to Windows, ? I mean, it's just such an insanely disconnected from reality statement. Obviously, the very reason people are using Linux is to get away from Windows. They wouldn't switch to Windows. It's not an alternative, retard. But it's just another example of how low a character this asshole has. So instead of ever fixing anything, she's just another one of these assholes. Just get caught in some other trap. You don't like the trap you're in? I'll fall into that one. You don't like the poisoned food at ShopRite? Go get some poisoned food at Stop and Shop. You're just such a fucking piece of shit. You're why civilization is declining. Your type, you wimp ass, cop out, Borg sucking, dick sucking sheeple. You're why the world sucks. All right. Have you heard of Camatista? Yes, it's been around for like 15 years. A recorder. I don't think they have a Linux version, to tell you the truth. But anyway, you might find that it helps in your presentations. I found that it was pretty buggy. That was my personal experience with it. And clearly, OBS is really good. piece of software. It's just that my computer doesn't have a great video card. And so it wouldn't matter whether I'm using Camatista or I'm using OBS. It's probably the problem is my video card's just not up to speed. And, you know, it's not the kind of computer you upgrade easy. So, but, you know, it's not a big deal. I figure out a solution. See me working on it? That's what I'm doing. I'm working on fixing it. That's what rational people do. They work on a solution. I see all too many educators these days trying to start their own YouTube channel. Where are they? That'd be interesting to see. But they often, I mean, educators, you mean religious kooks? That's probably what it means in her jargon. But they often make the mistake of putting too little effort into overall presentation. Again, because why? You see the world that way, right? You're an imbecile, and you know that imbeciles, no, they can't do this verbal thing. Yeah, you know, they can't learn anything, you know, without Barney the dinosaur jumping up and down and explaining it to them. Look at it this way. No, fuck you. I wouldn't look at anything the way you do with your crooked, skanky cunt eyes. How are you going to compete with channels that are already successful? Well, that's really not my mission. My mission is I just offer and see if somebody shows up. Now, I don't see any other channel that actually has an invite to talk about physics. So, you know, it's that issue really can't be that, oh, they're doing it so much better. That nobody's interested in talking. Nobody's interested into being directly challenged. They're just interested in being trolls like you, little weak-ass trolls, on a more massive scale than anybody could have predicted 10 years ago. Well, that's just nonsense. Like Khan Academy, he was financed by Microsoft. I mean, get real. Jesus. And the like. When you're using caveman technology, just my 2 cents. So she must be a real whore for Bill Gates, you know, the great innovator who invented renting operating systems. What a swell guy. I love people who rent stuff, rent healthcare, rent medication, rent. Yeah, landlords are just so cool. Fucky Yui, bitchy. She's quite hateable, right? It's not just me, right? She was hateable. Yeah, I hated her. All right, I'll put this over here and see what we get. Some other, probably a moron, but let's see what happens. I took my son, well, obviously you're not a very bright person, to the park, and when we got home, we found his goldfish dead. Yes, well, he's going to have lots of little sad experiences, because that's part of shitty life. And maybe someday he'll have to watch his wife die, go belly up. And then he'll go belly up in some horrible way. Thanks to you. Yeah, all your fault. You're going to kill him someday, you know. You're just going to basically murder him, which is a hard situation for any first-time parent. How do I explain autoerotic asphyxiation to a 4-year-old? Oh, you're a funny guy, huh? Oh, you're hilarious. No. Like this guy, he's saying get a job. Like this guy has a job. Yeah, no chance. Cowboy, no doubt. I think the state of Texas did give him a fake job. Like they give jobs to retards, you know, like at the store to pretend to push a cart or something just to make the retards feel good. So anyway, it seems to be working, and I don't think there's much else. So unless there's some commenters, I'll probably just toddle off. Just to test to see if this frame rate is better. Inception. Yeah, but I do hope the electric boom guy makes a another video just to qualify what insults he's willing to accept and which ones he won't, and to make sure people understand what this subject's about. You know, the idea that there's two voltages in the same location is a rather extraordinary assertion. After hundreds of years of experiments with electricity, it's kind of bizarre that somebody can get away with asserting, oh, there's actually two voltages in the same location. And to say Faraday says so, which is even more, I think, insane. Like, I don't think Faraday ever proposed that theory. But they clearly don't understand at all how voltage is created in inductors. They just have no, they really think it's some fluxy thing inside the space, inside the wire. The fluxy thingy is somehow doing, they just didn't even understand that it's just the force comes off the magnetism and actually physically hits the wire and causes little bits of voltage, little bits of pressure. And when you add up all the pressure, it comes out to a total amount of pressure. It pressurizes the pipe. It's like little tiny, it's like if you could make molecules of water really small and you had a big copper pipe. And in the case of a magnetism, so nothing else makes small molecules except for the magnet. So that when you bring the magnet hose near the wire, it shoots little pieces of water through the pipe, and it goes inside the pipe, and it just builds up pressure inside the pipe. But it really has to do with how fast you move the hose. If you don't move the hose fast enough, it can't get through the pipe. But the faster you move the hose, the more water that gets inside the pipe, and the more pressure inside the pipe. I mean, you can draw an illustration of this, but these morons still won't pay any attention. And they won't explain how that analogy is somehow provably wrong or incorrect, or it can't be that way. They'll never explain how it can't be that way. What piece of evidence in the world proves it can't be that way? Never provide that. So anyway, 30 more seconds or so. There's nobody got anything to say, and we will say goodnight, Gracie, and such. So I think this worked okay. So it's a good enough substitute for live videos. If it worked. And I can keep the same background, which I like the continuity. And I can have the drawing, and I can put text in, and it's a little sloppier. The lines aren't as smooth, but yeah, it really did work. Mostly. Alrighty then. So till the next time, and such, and so forth, and what.